I was at this mosque with my students. That was in 1986. To come and look at the longest spanned earthen vault in the world, spanning 8.2 meters. I bow to Sarkin Maganin Zazzau. So today, I'm not going to talk on the Zaria Mosque, which was initially what I was supposed to talk on. I'm going to talk on a bigger thing, that is Zazzau. Zazzau is one of the original Hausa kingdoms. Can we go to the next slide, please? And it was part of the Hausa Bakwai, which was created from Daura, which is called the spiritual birthplace of the Hausas. So there were actually 7 states of the Hausas, and they were characterized not just as cities, not just as cities, as towns. They were environments that had different settlements, and they consisted of world capitals, precinct-based spatial organizations, and strong palace, mosques, and market triads. Most of them had this particular similarity of having the mosque, the palace, and the market as the central core. Each state traditionally had its own specific economic or military role within the region. We had the Kano-Katsina axis, which was a trade area. We had the eastern flank, which was Hadejia, and we had the Gobir, which was on the western flank, and then we had Zazzau, which was the interface with the Middle Belt and the protector of the Hausa Bakwai at that time. What was the political system? The political system was similar for the 7 Hausa states. It revolved around the emir, who was called the Sarki, who held supreme political and military authority during the Habe era. This was the pre-Islamic era, around 1200 years ago. The emir acted not only as the leader, but he was also the chief priest. There was a centralized authority, and the Sarki had his ministers, who were called the Emir's Council. They had the Waziri, Madawaki, Galadima, Ma'aji, Sarkin Yaki, Dogari, Sarkin Power. These ministers provided checks and balances for the emirate. Zazzau, like I said earlier, performed not only as a military node, but as an economic node. And I'm sure some of you, if I ask you today, where did Zazzau come from? I was surprised to find out that the meaning of Zazzau really came from Zozo. It meant fertile land, reflecting an economy grounded in productive farming and herding that supported a large population in Zazzau pre the Islamic era. Also, Zazzau was a military node for protection. Under the leadership of Queen Amina in the 16th century, Zazzau reached its military peak. Her campaigns expanded the kingdom's influence as far as Pararafa, Bauchi, and the Lupe land. Queen Amina is credited with the first armor, iron armor, which we used to call Rigan Silke, and helmets during her reign. This was before the Sheikh Usman Danfodio, which came in around 1804. And during pre-Islamic and early Hausa stage, settlements were compact, nucleated, and often surrounded by defensive walls. Amina did it, and we still have presently the existing walls, even though it has been reduced due to development. If we look at slide 8, you can see there's the Amina's wall. This is Amina's wall. You can see the size. This is the present walls. So you can see Amina's wall encompassed more than 10 times of what we have presently. That shows you a lot of developments that came up later on during the colonial and post-colonial that reduced the development of Zazzau to what it is today. Now, the Islamic influence, can we go to slide 9, please, came up and changed how Zazzau's planning took place. Zazzau became part of the Sokoto Caliphate, which, of course, that is what Mai Martaba is. He's the 19th emir from the Sokoto Caliphate after the Fulani Jihad. And then the Islamic influence provided 3 keys. Central Friday Mosque became focal points. If you look at these sketches, you can see mosques, even though it's not very clear, were centers of the neighborhood. So mosques played a very big role in how these neighborhoods were constructed. So neighborhoods were constructed around extended family compounds. What we traditionally call what? Gidang Gandu. For those who are not Hausas, we don't have plots of land. We have family compounds. And family compounds play a big role in our traditional way of living. That was meant to be based on kinship, and there was a family head. Then emphasis on privacy and gendered spaces became the norm with the coming of Islam. So this period reinforced a hierarchical spatial order. We had the Emir's palace, which is the seat of power, the religious institutions, which were the mosques and the Quranic schools, then the residential quarters, which were the neighborhoods, then we had the markets. Now, it is very important for us to understand that Zazzau is not an accidental city or urban center. It is a deliberately structured socio-political landscape encoded in space, a political capital, a center of Islamic scholarship, and a model of pre-colonial urban intelligence. During the colonial era, which came up in the 20th century, that is after the Usman Danfodio revivalism, the British came in with a tripartite urbanism. This tripartite urbanism changed the structure of Zazzau Zaria, because what we know as Zazzau metamorphosed into Zazzau and Zaria. The 3 major urbanisms were the government reserved areas, of course, which were initially called European reservation areas. They were low density. They were meant to be a buffer between the colonialists and the so-called, in quote, natives. Well, I don't like using the word natives. I like using the indigenous people. And I remember a professor of mine used to tell me that they used to create those things so that we don't know that they used to fight with their wives. So they created the GRAs, and then the GRAs were far away from you, so you don't know, and they used to call them Zaki. I'm sure some of you have heard that word. They say Bature Zaki. It was all based on that, to create that facade of being somebody that is not human. But we realized that they were as human as us, even worse. So, apart from the GRAs, they also created the Sabangari, which were the new towns. If you look at the slide 11, they had this. This was the golf course, and then they created a totally different area and then they had the Southern Gari on this side. This was around 1918. These were the maps they were making then, 1918. And then they had Tubuwada, which is closer by, but is meant for the non-indigenous northern Nigerians who were not part of the aristocracy of the walled city. So the key colonial urban innovations were grid pattern layouts, which is different from what we have. We have in Zazzau what is called a starburst planning, and you'll see it when I go to talk about the precinct. They had grid layouts, straight lines that were straight. Of course, they came in with vehicles. In Zazzau, during the pre-colonial times, there were no vehicles, so we didn't have the need to have the wide roads that we presently have. So they came up also with land use specialization, which means creating industrial layouts, residential layouts, and so on and so forth, not based on the spatial requirements or the spatial planning methods that were based on the precinct system. And then they came up with their military, the cantonments, which was used to contain the so-called natives. Of course, they met already an established hierarchy of governance. So they didn't have to come in with their own, they only had a head, and then they walked through our own, and they called it what? Indirect rule. Now, what is a precinct in Zazzau? We are talking about the precinct-based urbanism, the logic, the planning logic of Zazzau. The precinct-based design of Zazzau is one of the most sophisticated indigenous urban planning systems in pre-colonial West Africa. It reflects a layered integration of